Welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody. It's wonderful to be here today. And we've got with us a very special guest, Mr. Niels Gott, who will be joining us in the video here in just a moment. Hi, Niels. How are you?
I am great, Kate. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm great. I am so excited that you're here today. And we've got such a fun topic to talk about. I think it's fun because it's something we can solve for and move on with burnout and like really heal ourselves and enjoy life more. But we'll get all into that. But thanks for coming today. As we get started, just so you know you're on the right airplane, we are talking about burnout and how burnout is not the cost of ambition, that we can be ambitious, we can have big goals, and also not be burned out by them at the same time. And Niels, I'm really excited to introduce him to you today. I met him recently at a networking event called Purpose Fueled, and we were making blankets together for a charity. And he shared with me that he was a positive psychology coach, a positive psychology consultant, and a master in positive psychology. And I was like, I need to know more about all of this positive psychology. So we met and chatted, and I thought, you know what? The world needs to know more about this, not just me. And I had to share Niels with everyone. So welcome in Niels. Niels, he's a transformational guide and facilitator and coach. And he's a founder and chief awesome officer at Awesome Coaching, based in Stillwater, Minnesota. And he works a lot with leaders and teams to lead with greater intention, resilience, and sustainability. Fun fact about Niels, he brings 22 years of military service. Thank you, Niels, giving you a grounded understanding of what real leadership looks like under pressure, not the polished version, but the kind that really tests character, clarity, and presence. Niels holds a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, and he's also a ICF a credentialed coach and certified burnout coach. So he knows all about this topic today. We're going to have a lot of fun as we go through. And his work is really rooted in the science of human flourishing, resilience, and positive psychology. And we are going to have a conversation today about how burnout can quietly develop before we even recognize it. Welcome, Niels. Tell us, what else should we know about you today as we get started on this?
Well, thanks so much, Kate. Again, I'm delighted and thrilled to be here as well. I suppose the only other thing that you should know about me is that apart from being a positive psychology junkie, which it was clearly obvious from the intro, but I am also a dork about all things Nordic, and that ties into this idea of human flourishing. I mean, my name probably gives it away. I've got Danish ancestry and I've also got Norwegian ancestry, but I've trained with the Norwegian army a handful of times, and I can go on and on about the
Oh my
Nordic way of
goodness,
life. So that's just
that's
another little
amazing.
facet.
I did not know that about you. Look at all the things we're learning already today.
Right on.
So, well, Niels, tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you end up doing this work? Obviously, your background is unique. It's not a corporate kind of progressive background. How did you end up in this space?
Yes. Well, I should start by just giving a very quick explainer of positive psychology for anyone that's not familiar with that term,
Thank you.
because, too often people hear that and they assume I mean positive thinking, and that's not really it. I mean, that could be a part of it, but the best way to think about it is, well, the way Marty Seligman, who gets credit for creating the field, he calls it the science of well-being. And what's important to know is that since about World War II, traditional psychology operated from the premise that the absence of disease equaled health. Positive psychology says, well, maybe, but that's not enough. In order to get north of neutral, we need to focus on all of the other things that help us understand our strengths and help us be able to lean into those more effectively. And so disease is one thing, and that's the malady, and certainly we need to deal with pathology, but that's not what positive psychology is about. Positive psychology is about strengths, and it's about understanding those key components of human flourishing. And so I just want to make sure that people have that context, because too often They think it's all puppy dogs and rainbows. And if only that were true, but that's not even really what the field is about. It's an academic,
Oh,
rigorous field. And so just want to make sure I make that clear. And clearly, I have a lot of
thank
passion
you.
about the area.
Thank you so much. That was my next question for you. Tell me a little bit more. So, what I hear there, very interesting. Um, what you're saying is lack of disease or lack of a problem, let's say, is not enough to have true flourishing and well-being. That's
Absolutely.
just kind of neutral.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Great. And then how, today we're talking about burnout. How would you define burnout then in that same thread of definition?
Mm. So there's a few different things to keep in mind, and the we'll get into burnout, at least the certification that I went through that was absolutely fascinating. And the easy way to think about that is this sort of three-phase model that first we go through alarm, where our system's aroused because we're put under higher stress. We're in a new environment where we've got to be able to rise to the occasion. We go from that to adaptation as we figure out how to navigate this new, what becomes new normal. And then finally, burnout happens when we drop off the cliff and we end up in exhaustion. And usually that's
Mm,
that's where our body has finally thrown in the towel and, hey, you're not listening to me. Um, we're hitting the brakes, whether you like it or not. And so, there's all
yeah.
kinds of stories about how that happens. But so I just want
Yeah.
to make sure, people understand where I'm coming from when I think about burnout. So in the context of positive psychology and how that's useful, the field gives us a ton of different tools to be able to, as I've already mentioned, think about the different facets of human flourishing. And so if we lean into what the field offers us, we've got a set of tools to be able to, first of all, navigate that adaptation, but more importantly, pull ourselves back before we tip over that
Mhm.
cliff into exhaustion. And so
Mhm.
I can go on and on about each of these pieces. I want to be careful not to become a lecturer here, but I'll pause there and see if there's more detail you want me to tease apart.
Well, we're going to get into this. Don't worry.
Awesome.
And the first part of this is going to be conversation with you. And, as anyone listening here today has any questions, you can put them right into the chat. Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind trying out the chat right now, just so that everyone can see where to put their notes. And we'll keep your name anonymous so you can ask any of your dumb, smart questions that you have about this topic. So you can post at any point in the chat there, and then we'll integrate and bring your question to the table for Niels. I wanted to ask you though, Niels, uh, how did you get into this?
Mm.
Tell me that.
Yes, absolutely. And so, as you mentioned, I spent 22 years in uniform. Back in around 2010, I was a company commander and had some troops getting ready to deploy. And that's when this new training package landed in my lap that I came to know as Master Resilience Training. Well, back then, the Army had come to grips with the fact that we were dealing with about 22 suicides a day. And
Oh
so
my
it's a
God.
significant issue that we've got to to deal with because it's tragic and there's all kinds of reasons why that's not something that we can be okay with. So what the Army did is they reached out to Dr. Seligman, the Penn Resilience Center, and that's where this program came from. And when the Army handed that to me, I was like, where'd this come from? This is incredible. That's the first I'd heard of resilience as a as a discipline more than just a word. It's the first time I'd heard of positive psychology. It's the first time I'd heard of Marty Seligman. And so when I got out of the military, that's when I started my journey to become an executive coach, including going back to school. And I actually got to go to UPenn and study with and from Marty. And I even got the honor of serving as an assistant instructor with him for a semester. And so I'm passionate about this field because it changed my life. And the reason why the military experience is important is, like I was saying before, too often when folks aren't familiar with the field, they think it's all just puppy dogs and rainbows. Well, if you know of a
Right.
grittier lab than the Army to learn about resilience, I'm all ears. And so that's why this field matters. But that was really my first
Yeah.
introduction
Yeah.
into, you know,
How how did that affect your leadership at the time? Obviously, it opened your eyes quite a bit. And for anyone who's listening or rewatching on the YouTube channel, you know, if you're a leader that is just trying to figure out how to navigate this as a leader for your team, um, how did you go about implementing and thinking about that as you were learning this? And
Mm.
what effect did that have?
Oh, yeah. Th- there's so much to work with there. I think my natural instinct before that was to to really lean into empathy and humility. And so that might have already made me a little bit unique as a leader in that context. But I think that's part of why this body of work resonated with me so deeply because it allowed for this space to, first of all, just be honest and vulnerable with how we're doing. Because resilience obviously implies that we're going through something hard and we've got to figure out how to get through it. We've got to figure out how to get through it intact so that we can fight again another day, literally or metaphorically speaking. And so certainly what it gave me was the validation that empathy is not just okay, it's necessary for great leadership. And so I think
Mm,
in addition, I mentioned humility. I think those two components, while obviously they're things that I care about, in the leaders that I've seen that have been most effective, those qualities show up time and time again. And of course, leadership's different for everyone. Everyone's got their own style and their own approach and what works well for them. I think having clear values is table stakes, no matter what they are. Nonetheless, I think these two values are really important. And so I think that's one way
wow.
that, a leader can adapt that. Um, and then we can get into, all the specific tools and how that actually shows up from a practical standpoint. But it starts with that self-knowledge and it starts with an awareness of how we're doing so that we can meet our people where they are as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, we're talking about the science of well-being, and human flourishing here. And I have a lot of questions on recognition of when we're, as you called it, in that exhaustion place, when we're jumping off the ledge. We've just gone way past adaptation to a new normal, and it's just complete shutdown, I think was a word you used. Um, you feel that most people are aware that that is happening for them, as a leader, like in the moment? Do people know that that's happening, or is that something that like for me, when I have had depression spells, I've only been aware of it when I came out the other side. Now I have help for it, but like I didn't know it was depression until I came out the other side. And is burnout like that, or is that something else?
Absolutely. I think that's right. That's a perfect analogy for how people realize they're burned out. They've gotten into adaptation without even realizing it. They're operating because that's what's expected of them. And so they're rising to the
Mhm.
occasion. But at a certain point, the body calls a timeout. And whether it is just exhaustion and people just straight they're done. A friend of mine was sharing a story how that happened to her last year. And without getting into all the details of what got her to that point, she was on camera facilitating, doing a remote workshop, and then all of a sudden just fainted. And so, it was
Oh,
fortunately she was okay. She didn't, hit herself on the way down or anything. And but that was her
yeah,
clue that her body was saying time out. But I think
yeah.
you called it is that so often leaders are not aware of what's happening, and so um,
Mhm.
the body keeps the score to steal the title of a great book. But the body is trying to send us signals. So often, I think in our Western culture, we're operating from neck up, and we're not paying attention to our whole system, and that's part of why we don't even realize until our body's like really calling a major timeout.
I feel like I could be under the microscope right now, and it's operating from the neck up half the time. I mean, seriously, seriously. I'm going to just launch a few questions and some different polls here, Niels, because I want to get a flavor for who we've got in the room here today. So I've just got a few questions to share with everyone who's online. The first one being your energy level this week. Okay, we had Memorial Day. If you were in the US, you had a day off Monday. I've been speaking to people this week, and some of them have shared like with me, how come if it's a shorter week, technically it feels longer?
It's so
Um,
true, though. I love the irony of that, but it's so true.
so we've got a few answers here. It looks like we're about 50-50 on some people are doing okay. Some people are barely holding it together. I'm sorry if you're barely holding it together. I'm glad you're here. You're in the right place. And if you're doing all right, good for you. Again, I think what you'll hear from Niels today will help you even maybe flourish and get beyond doing okay. I have to say, I physically moved my apartment. So I'm a little bit tired, but I'm running this week. So I'm at that between 50 to 79.
Well, moves are a whole other thing because that takes all kinds of energy. But for folks that are coming out of a long weekend and they're at 50% and barely holding it together, I think what that indicates is that there's an opportunity to better use rest. Rest isn't just simply, not doing anything. We need to be much more intentional about what it takes to recharge. And so,
Mm.
at least for me, when we've got a shorter week, it could feel longer because I haven't rested or recharged properly, and now I'm trying to catch up because other things got compressed. So,
Uh, that's a good point because just because it's a shorter week, technically, a lot of the time I expect myself to produce the same 60 hours of work,
exactly. Yeah, so many of us
but
do.
in 4 days instead of five.
Right. Right. Because that makes
Yeah.
sense. But it's what
Yeah.
we do to ourselves. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I've got another question here. Which statement feels a little too accurate right now? And you can choose any of these, like I'm productive but constantly tired, rest feels earned, not necessary. I don't know how to slow down, and I don't know how to slow down again. So I've got three
Really
choices.
don't know.
I think I'm in that last category, the second, slow down. Like, what is slow down? I don't get it. That is something that I personally struggle with quite a bit, is I'm not a slow person. It looks like we've got some answers coming in from the audience here, where, you know, people out here are productive but constantly tired. Productive but constantly tired. So if that's happening for people, so we're productive, we're doing. It's like you were saying, you manage from the neck up. Um, what is the danger for people in that place? From your knowledge, if we're,
Hmm.
you know, what do you say there?
I think the biggest danger is equating output with our value and attaching our
Mm,
self-worth to that production. Just because we're busy doesn't necessarily mean that we're effective. We can be efficient all day long, cranking things out, getting things done, checking things off the list, which is starting to feel exhausting just picturing that. But it's back to what we expect of ourselves and what we feel others are expecting of us. We get into that busyness trap. I used to joke about holiday letters, the way they had become such report cards, and all my friends would be sending me these. The holiday card is here's what I've done the whole year, and I'm like, I'm so
yeah,
busy. Inevitably, that
yeah,
phrase would show up too, and I would just,
yeah,
I did it too. So I'm not trying to cast judgment on anybody, but I would look at that and be like, what are we doing to ourselves? Because busyness, we take that as like a badge of honor somehow, because again,
yeah,
we're it's our identity. We're attaching that output to our self worth and our value, and I
yeah.
think that's the biggest trap. So we've got to recognize these are very different things. Just because we're busy doesn't mean we're doing the right thing, first of all, or that we're necessarily doing it well. And if we're
Mhm.
tired, that's a real clue that something isn't sustainable.
Interesting. And um, I think that we learn different messages as we're growing up
Oh yeah.
about ambition and about progress and working hard. I'm going to launch another question for everybody here. So, growing up or in your career, what message did you absorb about success? And you can answer any one of these. Um, Work harder than everyone else. Rest can wait. If you want more, sacrifice more. Busy means valuable. Um, I think something for me was get the A plus.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get the A plus, you may as well have gotten an F. So that perfectionism was success. No one can find a fault in me. And if no one can find a fault in me, if I'm faultless, then I am successful. And that's a message I received personally,
Mm.
which is exhausting.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. None of us are perfect
Yeah.
after all, yet we get into that
Yeah.
trap.
Yeah. And this, I'll share the answers here. So it looks like we're about half and half with if we're busy, we're valuable. And if we want more, sacrifice more. Interesting. Those are both very similar. What do you say to those definitions of success, Niels? And have you seen this before for leaders?
Oh, definitely. Well, and the busy means valuable. That's part of what we were just talking about a moment ago of our excuse me, of that production, that identity. We've tied our self-worth to that output. Excuse me.
Hmm.
But also this idea of um I've already forgotten the fourth one. I was so excited about busy means valuable that what was the fourth option? I lost my train of thought. I'm
On
sorry.
that poll, we had if you want
If you
more,
want more
sacrifice.
sacrifice more,
Yes, yes,
yeah.
yes.
So this gets into this idea of deserving, and so much like you're talking about that A plus, that if you didn't get the A plus, you might as well have gotten an F. That you're failing. Uh, these things don't have to be tied together. We don't have, just like today is about burnout is not the price of ambition. Similarly, we deserve to be whole, sustainable human beings. And so uh, I hate that we deprive ourselves of the things we need because it becomes a vicious cycle. We need to be able to recharge so that we can be in our optimal zone of performance. And so if we deny ourselves of that, that's where we start to spiral and we can end up burning
Yes.
ourselves out quite easily.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, we need to know more about how we can work on this because it sounds like a lot of us here struggle with some similar challenges in that we're trying to do such good work. Like the motivation behind it from people I usually meet, the motivation is usually really good. We want to do well. We want to hit our KPIs. We want to achieve the mission. We want to make sure our customers are taken care of and that our team members are taken care of. And we have that great motivation. Um, what insights do you have for us that we can learn about how to take care of ourselves even when our motivation is good and not allow us to falter over into that exhaustion?
Right on. Well, I think again, it comes back to awareness. And I've got a PDF that I can share. Um,
Wonderful.
I've got some of these things from I mentioned this burnout coaching certification, which was absolutely incredible, and I can totally talk your ear off about. But with this idea of burnout, or at least of self-awareness of burnout, there's six drivers that can help us figure out what
Oh,
domain might be affecting us the most. And so let me find this file to be able to attach it.
oh, that'd be
Where is it?
wonderful. Thank you, Niels. I'm ready to take
Absolutely.
notes just in
Right
case.
on.
So we got this.
Perfect. And so there it is in the chat. Hopefully, that's something that folks are able to get to. I've left it copyrighted by, well, Neha Sangwan was the facilitator, and I can go on about what an incredible human she is, but she was the person that led this certification course for us. But what you'll see in this tool is those six domains that can lead to burnout, whether it's the workload that we've taken on, the amount of control that we feel that we've got over the work that we do, the autonomy that we have in our lives, the amount of recognition that we receive, how attached we are to our community, how strong the relationships are, that connection, especially with our coworkers, fairness. If we are operating in a domain that perpetually feels unfair, of course, that's going to lead to some burnout, and
Mhm.
meaning, which I think is perhaps one of the most important things because we're sense making beings. We're always looking for meaning and purpose in what we do. And so this is just a quick tool to tap into that self-awareness, at least a little inventory of what's happening in our lives. And that can start to give us a clue of where there could be a mismatch or we could be setting ourselves up uh, to head
Yeah.
towards that exhaustion phase.
Fantastic. So I put this out in the chat. I downloaded it and put it out there for everybody. Thank you, Niels. And we'll send this as a follow-up. But again, here are the six drivers. Let's take a couple of these and talk through them right now. Is that okay, Niels?
Absolutely, by all means.
Um, and maybe what we can do is factors contributing to burnout. If one of these really stands out to you and you're listening right now, you're on the call right now, which one would matter most to you to learn more about with an expert here today? I think for me, a challenge for me is probably well, I'm always trying to control everything. Once in my life, I was called a controlling prima donna, and I thought it was the highest compliment I could have ever been paid. Which I've now tried to not be that way anymore. But control is a big one for me, and then workload, of course, are ones for me. But I want to see if anyone in the chat has one that they'd like to dig into, because this is for everybody. I don't see any notes yet. Well, let's talk about workload because I am quite sure that a lot of people may find a challenge with the balancing the demands and the resources we have to do in our job. So, if we were going to explore this, how would we think about looking at our workload?
Mm. I'm going to borrow a little bit from what we're talking about before, in recognizing that we can get stuck in this trap of busyness means that we're valuable. And so
Mhm.
that's part of why it can be so pernicious in the work environment is that if I can
Mhm.
show how busy I am, how much stuff I'm working on, boy, I must be really important and really valuable. And so we've equated
Mhm.
that self-worth to the output. And so that's where we can quickly get out of balance. But I think even more than that, right now, I mean, change is constant. We've known that forever, and I feel like right now it feels particularly poignant with the way that AI is changing things. And sometimes I feel like personally, while it's made me really productive and effective in some ways, I almost feel like I'm running even faster on the mouse wheel to try to keep up. And so paying attention to what we have to do the job that we're doing can give us a clue of if we're getting out of balance. I mean, saying yes is the other part of that's implied in that workload that we feel like we can't say no, and so we keep taking on more and more things, feeding
Mhm.
into that idea that our business equates our self worth.
Okay. So if we are finding ourselves in that space, so it's interesting. We just had Memorial Day. We're coming up on the summer. And there sometimes seems to be a notion that things slow down in the summer or that work is supposed to slow down in the summer. And of course, in different areas of the world, that's true. What is your experience with workload in the summer? And what are some things that people can do if workload is driving burnout? This
Mm.
summer coming up, what are some things that we can do to help us keep psychologically healthy and
Mm.
in a good place of well-being if workload's a problem?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I think of right away, some companies in Minnesota, I don't know that I wish more did this, had this idea of summer Fridays, where that we no meetings on Fridays during the summer, uh, because we're trying to encourage folks to take advantage of the great weather here in our state and take some time to recharge. And so, if workload is really eating your lunch, not only does taking time away, not only is that important, but like we said earlier, being able to use that time intentionally to recharge is what matters. And so thinking about what's important in your life, which is very often the relationships, the people that are closest to us, how are we investing in those relationships so that it's a mutually fulfilling thing. And that's what I love about relationships and about high quality connections between us is that it feels good to make other folks feel good. And so it becomes this generative cycle where we're investing in the relationships that matter most to us. We often get back out just as much as we put in. And so
Mhm.
that's one thing that I think about. I feel like some companies, the workload, maybe it ebbs. And I feel like for a lot, it doesn't, especially right now where things feel so uncertain and the pace of change
Right.
feels so accelerated. back to this idea of a shorter work week. Well, that's great. You give me Friday off. It just means I still got to do 60 hours of work in these 4 days. And so that
Yes.
gets us into, thinking about boundaries. And it's not about necessarily saying no, which I know for a lot of folks is really hard. That's a whole nother skill set we could talk about. But it's about, making trade-offs. If I take this on, something's got to give. So what is the priority? Because we can't do everything, even though we might want to tell ourselves that we are always the A plus student. The reality is that we're simply not. We're not going to be A plus at everything. And so boundaries is a whole nother domain that plays into that workload. How to be thoughtful about them, intentional about them, and how to honor them. Because that's really where we get into burnout is when we can't uphold the boundaries that we try to set for ourselves.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I have a million questions. So something I see happening in the career space, and this is particularly true in functions like human resources, functions like marketing, and some account management related roles, where the mood right now, because of agentic AI and other things like, can speed up some of the tactical work. We're seeing compression of roles so that maybe one person is now doing the job of three people. And so that's what's happening in tech a lot. Like there's a lot of layoffs in tech, human resources and marketing roles in particular are getting squashed. Do you find that the leaders you're working with are aware that there need to be trade-offs for employees?
I wish more were,
Yeah,
unfortunately, um, because leaders are often in that same trap of my worth is my production, and often leaders it's the productions through other folks, of course, and so they. I wish more were aware of that trade-off, but that's why I'm so passionate about human flourishing because the cost at the end of the day is human life. We don't get any more time, and the time that we do have is so short, and so it's I love that someone pointed out that meaning was one of the big ones for them, is because with our finite time on this planet, what gives us meaning, and how are we going to be able to attend to that? So
yeah,
I feel like if more leaders were paying attention to that trade-off, if more leaders were aware of what meaning means to us, to the human experience,
yeah,
perhaps that trade-off would become a little bit easier to make.
yeah. Let's talk about that. Um, so someone had shared in the chat that the one that was an important driver for them is that they have meaning in their work. And I know I hear this from a lot of people, especially when they're in big corporate multinational organizations, that the meaning sometimes gets lost and they feel that their purpose is just kind of fades away like a little bit of smoke when they are not really aligned with the mission, or they don't have input to decision making, or they don't have an ability to question or ask or divert or resource something. Talk to us a little bit about meaning and burnout. And also, most importantly, since this was someone's a trigger for someone here, what can we do when this is a challenge in our work environment?
Mm. There's so much there. First, I'll just share a vulnerable personal story if that's all right. And what happens when meaning isn't there. I don't remember if I
Yeah.
shared this story with you already, Kate, but my brother, love him to death. He was a Marine though, so I try not to hold that against him. But he when he got out of service, he went back for a double major in accounting and econ, and so that's what he does by trade now. Is he's an accountant, and he was in public practice and was in a really grind. It was just a grinding job, and his boss was not empathetic, unfortunately. And he finally reached a breaking point where he'd been spending countless hours on this project. Got to the end of the week, and his boss basically told him that this was useless. That you did all this work, and the client's not even going to look at it. And he suddenly felt he had no meaning because he had put so much blood, sweat, and tears into completing this project, and to be told that it's meaningless. He actually had a nervous breakdown, and that was just really the tipping point. And so, speaking of burnout, that was his clue that he just gone too far. So,
Yeah.
getting back to what can people do in their own space, I was just talking with a bunch of leaders yesterday actually about this idea of vision in an environment, and that's from a leadership point of view. I think that that's one of the key responsibilities is a clear and compelling vision. Why does this matter? And that's what helps to give folks some meaning. But assuming that you don't have that, because I think that's part of the question that you were asking, and you're finding yourself grinding away in a role, I'm thinking about motivation theory from Ed Deci and Rick Ryan out of Harvard, where they talk about all of the factors that go into how we find motivation, and they've got a whole spectrum of internal to external motivation. But I love the way that Dan Pink really synthesized their work into autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That when we have those three elements in our work, it's so much more motivating. And so that's one thing I've already been talking to leaders about for years is that what are you doing in your environment to make sure that folks have some autonomy, that they have the ability to get great at their craft, and that most importantly, they have purpose. And so this is a long-winded way of saying that the way that I can reclaim agency, if I'm in a role where I'm feeling like I don't have meaning, that's where I need to just take a time out and think about my own values and what is important to me in life, how I make sense of the world, and find something, because there's always something. Find something in my role that I can connect to, that can connect to one of those values, so that I can get some meaning and purpose out of what I do. Um, it's certainly not a one size fits all approach, and there's never any guarantees. But when things feel beyond our control, we need to dial back that circle to what is within our influence to again
Yeah.
attach our values to some element of the work. Maybe it's relationships that we've got, maybe it's a particular task that we do. And this is where we can get into our own strengths as well. So it's not just our values, but what are the things that I'm great at so I can really step
Hmm.
into my zone of genius.
Hmm. Hmm. So a few things there. Gosh. Okay, let me get this note down here.
We might need to
Yeah,
schedule
connect,
longer episodes, by the way, Kate, because I feel like I can go on for hours and hours.
connecting back to what you said earlier. Um, Let me see, where was it? Oh my gosh. Um, you were talking about trade-offs and how we were investing in relationships and how it feels good to help others feel good. And then, thinking about the values that I might have. And like you're saying, in a work environment, I may not have that autonomy depending on my role. I may not be getting the training I need to become masterful at whatever my craft is. And I may feel that lack of purpose, but I like how you were talking about earlier and then brought it back again to relationships. And a lot of leaders I talk to, when they talk about their work and what matters most to them. So, this is a conversation I have in every resume review call. I ask them about their leadership and their leadership philosophy. And I think this is a great place, like from a place of meaning, is how I lead others, how I influence and collaborate with others. What am I bringing to the party rather than what am I taking away from the party? And having that type of perspective, even when we don't have the other benefits of that we'd like to have in a relationship, can really help people feel better at work and have more meaning at work. And a lot of people do lean into that
Mm.
leadership. Yeah.
So well put. And I love that that's something that you talk about as well, this idea of leadership philosophy. I think that's so important because oftentimes times leaders are leading perhaps by default, much like
Hmm.
folks will live their life by default rather than by design, which is a whole other
Hmm.
tangent I can get off on. But I think that you're really touching on something incredibly important there because knowing what my philosophy as a leader is helps me to better show up in a way that people can get the chance to do their best work. And again, I
Yeah.
feel like that's another key component of great leadership is setting the
Yeah.
context for people to get to shine, to get to do their best stuff.
And we can do that no matter what role we're in, right? We can set the
Absolutely.
context to help people do their best work. Oh my gosh, let me write that one down. That's a wonderful, wonderful takeaway. You said something I want to go back to. And I know I'm not following our discussion guide at all, Niels, just because this is how it goes. And please, everyone, send in your questions for Niels in the chat. We'll keep them anonymous. But we'd love to hear your questions. And Niels is here to answer them live. Get some free coaching right now. Um, you had said that the cost of human flourishing is human life. That's big. That's really big. And you mentioned also that back when you were in 2010 and you started learning about resilience, that at that time the Army was dealing with the reality of 20 losing 22 people a day. That's a lot. And um, tell us more about why it's so important that we pay attention to this right now and some other things to do if we need help now in making sure that we are flourishing.
Oh boy,
I
so
know I
much to
asked
work with there.
10 questions at one time. I'm sorry.
No
Answer any
worries.
one of them. But that was a very powerful thing to say, that the cost of human flourishing, if we're not flourishing, the cost is human life.
Hmm.
And you know
Well,
that. Yeah.
yeah, the thing that instantly brings back is I mentioned Neha Sengwan, who created this course on burnout that I just went through, and so I'll very briefly tell a piece of her story, which I won't do justice, but the what you need to know is that she spent 10 years as an MD, uh, had her own case of burnout, which totally caught her off guard. And so that's why she changed directions in order to be able to devote her life to helping high performing executives and other coaches better understand burnout so that not only
Mhm.
can they try to prevent it from happening, but then do something about it if it does, to your point. But the reason why I'm talking about Neha is that the first time that I met her was an incredibly powerful experience. But one thing that she left with us that is stuck with me to this day is that every interaction is sacred. And it's back to this idea of human connection. And so as you ask about the way that I put it about human life, I th- that's the thing that inspires me because again, life is precious and we don't know how much time we get and we never know how much is left. And so I'm always inspired by the idea of living today for today, as though it were our last, because then it puts a lot of other things into context and helps to cut through some of the noise and the things we do to ourselves and the inner chatter and all of that
Yeah.
we can get ourselves practically neurotic about. So again, I feel like those are some of the things that get me going about why I see it, the cost is human life, because if we're just grinding people away, um, they're not finding meaning, first of all, but they don't get that time or that life energy back. Where we put our energy is, and I, realize I'm probably sounding a little bit metaphysical to some folks, and so I don't mean to come across as woo woo, but the reality is where you put your energy matters, and you only get so much of that. And so you don't always get a choice where you get to put it, unfortunately, depending on the role that you're in. But I always want to
Mhm.
empower folks to be intentional about where it is that they are putting it, especially leaders, because again, they play such a pivotal role in creating that environment for us to be able to thrive.
So I'm getting a picture here. I'm getting a picture here, like I'm drawing in my head a stick figure of a leader. Um, so I've got the stick figure on a piece of paper in front of me in my mind. And what I'm learning from you today is that with ambition, so wanting to be successful, and defining that I'm feeling successful, there are some attributes of that leader, and I'm just going to, like, in my head I'm like going to just drop these words around this. But how I would know that someone is not, let's see, how do I want to state it, like, not leading in burnout but leading from that place of flourishing, is that they're bringing their humility and empathy. They are bringing the resilience. They are helping others succeed. They are investing in relationships. They are adapting, and they are um, focused on their own well-being as well as others. They have clear vision, compelling visions. They share why things matter. Um, they help others achieve autonomy, mastery, and purpose, as well as doing that for themselves, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
And so some critical things, though, and you just mentioned being intentional, but a couple of things you mentioned that are core to this too, if I'm like got the stick figure with these attributes around them. You mentioned values and strengths. What if I don't know what my values or strengths are?
Ooh. Mm, brilliant question. And by the way, I love that you came up with the analogy of a stick figure. I think this is didn't see that coming. That's a great way to try to place everything that we're thinking about.
I try to make it concrete.
Well, and it
Like
makes it very practical.
how will I recognize this person, in
Yeah,
me or in someone else, right?
absolutely. Right on. Um, which I attempted to go off on a whole nother tangent about a training I used to do, but I don't think that's quite as important right now because the point of your question, if I don't know my own values and my own strengths,
Yeah.
that's often when I'm talking about leadership philosophy, that is the very first step is let's just talk about what what makes you you because we've all got different strengths and we've all got different values. And so there's some easy ways to just take an inventory. In terms of strengths, I'm a big fan of viacharacter.org. It's VIA character.org. It's a nonprofit grounded in the research. It's essentially part of the positive psychology field. It was created by some of the early thinkers in the space, and they've got 26 different character strengths that they have researched and they measure. And so you can go to that website and create a free account and take their strengths inventory, their strength survey. It takes like, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes, something like that. And so at the other end of it, you get a list of 20 of those. Did I say 26? Now I'm confusing myself if it's 24 or 26. Nonetheless, you get the list of the strengths and they're ordered according to you of what makes you you and the things that you're probably best at and most enjoy doing. And so I think that's
Mhm.
one easy way for a lot of leaders to start if they don't, or leaders or anybody, if someone's not aware of their strengths, that's a great way to start. Um, and they've got again, it's a nonprofit grounded in the research, as I mentioned. They've got tons of research on the website. So if you want to geek out like me and dig all the way into it, it's all there for the taking. But in terms of
Awesome.
values, I think that's equally important because that drives how we make sense of the world, but it also drives the decisions that we make. And most importantly, it drives how we treat each other. And so,
Yes.
that's something that can always lead to workplace conflict and interpersonal dynamics, which is a whole other topic that we could spend hours on.
Hmm.
Nonetheless, similarly, it's easy to do an inventory because when you look at a list of values, and that's how I would suggest a person start, because you can just Google, list of values, and you can take a look at these things, and you can say, oh, well, these all sound great to me. Well, if they're all great, well, you haven't identified the key ones that are important to you. And so this can be hard. Every time that I've done it, it feels hard because I want them all to be my top values. The reality is they can't be. And so forcing a leader to look at that list and star the top 3 or 5 that they see as most important is how we can start to drill down to what values are, because they are going to be different for everyone. And again, I've already
Hmm.
talked about why that can be important because that it's part of how we make sense of the world.
Hmm.
I've seen some other tools, but that's probably the easiest way to get started.
I
Again,
love
coming back
that.
to self-awareness, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, if I know those things, if I think what we're saying here too, and I love making this actionable for people. If I know my strengths and if I know my values, then I can make smart trade-offs. I can say, you know what? Hey, boss, I'm actually really good at analysis and I am not as good at data management. I'd rather analyze the data than pull the data. I'd rather get the insights than go out and ask the questions.
Right.
And like to look at the data to pull out the insights. And so we can have some trade-offs there where maybe someone else on the team is really good at pulling the data, or maybe the other person on the maybe your strength is pulling the data and it's someone else on the teams to develop insights. But if I know that that's a strength, I can have a trade-off. And I can feel a flourishing in that then because work won't feel so heavy, right?
Absolutely. Well said. Because that's the other thing that I often ask folks is how do you feel after work? If
Mm,
your work leaves you feeling like a sponge that's been wrung out, then there's probably a strong mismatch, or there's the potential for mismatch between strengths and values and
yeah,
the work that's to be done.
yeah,
On the other hand, if you feel just energized and refreshed after work, work doesn't feel like work, which of course is the utopia that few of us get to really truly experience. That's probably a sign that there's strong alignment between our strengths and the stuff that we get to do.
yeah, yeah. And my values, yes, I think like you talked about how it helps us make decisions, and how no, I lost my note. I have too many
How we make
notes.
sense of the
This is
world and
terrible.
how we treat each
Yeah,
other.
exactly. Integrity and transparency are really important for me. And I build that throughout all of Get Her Hired, through everything we do as a company. And when those things get lost in communication somewhere, it always feels icky. It
Hmm.
doesn't feel right. Whether it's with the client, I have to go back and say, okay, was I within my values in how this relationship worked or not? And if I can test them against my values, I can feel that flourishing. And if I can see that there was a place where it didn't align exactly, I can address it more quickly, right? Than waiting until it's just collapsed and I'm ready to jump off the cliff.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And I think that's probably why I naturally enjoyed you the moment that we met is that your values are right there. They're just so beautiful and your energy is just so
Yeah.
warm and inviting in that way that it's
Oh,
easy
thank
to
you.
see that integrity and transparency are key to how you
Yeah,
show up and everything you've
yeah,
got going forward.
absolutely. Yeah. And honesty, honesty. So let's go here. We've just got a few minutes left. Oh my gosh. And if anyone had any questions, please jump in the chat if you'd like to post any, because we really value you when you show up live and we want to make sure you're taken care of here. Um, what's the biggest mindset shift that ambitious professionals can make to avoid burnout? What is, give us just this one thing to take home with us here.
Mm. We haven't talked about the useful but invisible. And I think that's the thing about
Mhm.
ambitious leaders. And I've certainly seen it with a couple of high performing women that I've worked with recently, is that we've talked about this identity and that we tie our self worth into output and that we see our value in the production. And these two women in particular that are coming to mind, very true. One I was just talking with her yesterday, and this is something without getting into details of her role, so I don't accidentally dox her or the company. She was in a very visible role and was reaching a point of burnout and had expressed that to her boss. And so they had come to an agreement that, okay, we're going to put you in a different role that does better match your skills and what you want to do right now. Um, Strengths, I should say, because she was incredibly good at the job that she was in. She was just not happy and burning out and wanted something different. Problem is, they didn't backfill the other job. So it actually exacerbates. So she's been doing both jobs. And as part of our discussion, and that's why I say this useful but invisible, is that she realized that this has just been an expectation, that her ambition, her production, her overperformance have become taken for granted. It's just what's expected. And so that's the thing that can lead to burnout. And that's part of when you ask about a mindset shift, that's one thing that I'm trying to lean towards is to just be aware of that useful. I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir in some folks this idea of useful but invisible, and that's where I'm thinking of the other leader that I mentioned because she'd been in a role for 2 years and was putting in 80-hour weeks, and her boss had no idea because just incredible output, but it was completely invisible. So,
Mm,
long story short, the shift is what is your identity and what are you actually using to inform your value and what matters about who you are in the world and what you do, because otherwise you can end up in this useful but invisible trap. You can end up burning out because uh, these other things that we've talked about are not in alignment. But again, what is your identity and what are the things that matter most to you in the world so that you can attend to those in a way that matters?
I think yes. Yes, I love that. Um, the expectation that your ambition is just there. We normalize, for some people, just normalize that ambition
Yes.
where it gets then taken for granted by others. Absolutely happens every day with the people we talk with. Um, and our self-worth being tied to that production and output. Something that we do at Get Her Hired that is fascinating is we talk to women who they've achieved remarkable things, and yet they don't claim those things as their own wins. And so I want to just double down on what you were saying in useful but invisible. And what I want to say there is anyone out there, maybe this helps with your flourishing, is be visible.
Yes.
Name and claim the things you've accomplished. Um, Let people know about your work, and obviously, it has to align with who you are and your values. Some people think it's bragging or it's not being humble if you're, talking about what you've accomplished, but there are ways to do it, right, Niels? And
Yes. Yes.
claim
Yes.
that
Yes.
authority. Yeah. Oh my
Could not
gosh.
agree more.
Okay. All right. We have to go. I want to
Oh,
just, okay.
so
How
soon?
can people work with you? How can people find out more about you and how can they get involved in your work?
A couple ways, and I appreciate the ask. Find me on LinkedIn. There's not many Niels Gotts out there. I spelled the Danish way, Niels. And same thing, you can go to my website, nielsgott.com, which is an easy way to just make contact with me. So those are the ways to find me. I'm always up for a conversation, whether about the things we've talked about today or anything to do with human flourishing. And so I welcome anyone that wants to reach out and say hello.
Wonderful, wonderful, Niels. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to continuing the conversation with you at our next Purpose Field event where we meet up. And everyone out there, have a great day. We'll see you in a couple weeks at our next session. It's going to be solo, just me. So that'll be coming up in June. Um, and take care, everyone. Be well. And I hope everyone flourishes. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Kate. This was wonderful. Be well, everyone.
See you soon.